Well, once again, thank you very much for all your feedback on the conversation so far. And thanks for sharing your memories of performing and taking part in shows in Newry and Mournepoint and further afield. And thanks very much to everyone who's taken part in the interviews and for sharing your memories of being involved in shows. Today, I'm in conversation with a distinguished pianist who lives a wide and varied career as a recitalist, concerto soloist, and chamber musician. He's appeared with many orchestras in Ireland and around the world and in many of the world's greatest concert halls. With his sister Joanne, he founded Newry Chamber Music, bringing world-class professional chamber music home to Newry and the surrounding area. During lockdown, Newry Chamber Music provided an online series of live to your lounge concerts to maintain that vital link with the audience they describe as the fabric of their organisation, with the belief that the arts play a huge part in society, health, and well-being, and that classical music should have no barriers and be accessible to everyone. He's passionate about musical education and he's continued to teach his students at the Birmingham Conservitore remotely. When I caught up with him, we tested the data links to his newly acquired lockdown motorhome, a sort of musician on the move. He is David Quigley.
So I'm the youngest of four. I have two brothers, Keith and Gavin, and then my sister, who many people know, the violinist Joanne, and then myself, obviously. And so the two brothers and Joanne were having piano lessons already. And when I was 3 years old, I was pulling at my mommy's skirt saying, I want to have piano lessons as well, because of course I wanted to be doing what my two brothers and my sister were doing. So they were having lessons with a lady that people would be familiar with, Miss Dorothy Haynes Dent, who taught piano from her house on Canal Street. She wouldn't let me start when I was 3. She said to my mom, no, and he's too young. On my fourth, just after my 4th birthday, I think it was the week of my 4th birthday, I had my first piano lesson with
Brilliant.
Dorothy Haynes Dent. And I remember it very clearly. I remember that I was so excited because I was finally able to do, or able to sit at the piano and have a lesson with what my brothers and my sister were already doing. And I don't remember much after that, but my mom tells me that I was like a wee boy, obsessed, and I would just sit at the piano for hours, kind of picking out my own tunes, and literally hours, 2-3 hours a day, just kind of sitting there, fascinated by the instruments. So that's how I started off. And at the same time, I think it must have been about 6 months after that, I started violin lessons as well. So I was doing both, at the same time. So that's how it began.
So that music within the family and within the household was almost handed down to you, or maybe you reached out and grabbed it, would be a better way to describe it.
Well, it's interesting because neither my mummy or daddy are musicians, and they don't play, but there's music somewhere in the background, in the history. And my mum is very musical. I know she's got a great ear, and when she married my dad, one of the first things they decided to get was a piano for the house. And she says that she got the piano. She had no idea how to play it, but with one finger she'd be picking out Irish, jigs and reels and tunes, and so she's got a great ear for it. And she says that her household, she grew up on a farm in May, and she said most weekends there'd be parties and there'd be people coming in with fiddles and bodhráns and accordions, and there'd be great crack and singing and dancing to the all Irish. So there was music surrounding her all the time. And my daddy's side of the family the same as well. He I think I didn't know his father. My grandfather died before I was born, but I believe he was very much into the operatic society in Dundalk, and a lover of opera as well. So there was an interest there, So, but classical music with from mom and daddy, that wasn't their world at all, and I don't think they really kind of for myself and Joanne to actually for this to be our careers, this was would have been a very alien idea for them. I do remember, because I took to like a duck to water. I do remember my first competition, which was in Newry Fesh, and it was the Tiny Tots piano class, which I think was under 6, and I think I was 5. I think I just turned 5, and I remember Mrs. Cassidy was the steward or steward for the, you know, getting us all ready to go on stage. And I walked on, and so I was about that high. I mean, I'm not much bigger now, Declan, to be honest. I didn't grow an awful lot, but I'm a wee bit bigger now. And I got on the piano stool, and I couldn't reach the keys because the piano stool was just too low. It didn't have the, you know, the adjustable stools. So I remember her years later telling the story that she put, first of all, some cushions underneath me, and then she put some books on the cushion so I could actually reach the keyboard. And that was my first competition, which I won the cup for it. And my mummy has in a scrapbook at home. There was a lovely wee article in the Newry Reporter when I won that competition, and the adjudicator was a lady from England called Miss Alison Walker-Moorcraft, who I, by coincidence, met many years later at a concert of mine. And she wrote on the comments, "This boy has a real future as a concert pianist." And this was my very first competition at 5 years old, and that was very prophetic.
Have you kept a scrapbook?
Yeah, Mummy kept a lot of, you know, there's all the mark sheets and the you know, press cuttings and photographs throughout the year. And yeah, do you know, I'll show you something. I have a couple of things here. So this is not to do with playing the piano. This, at the same time, I was into everything. I was also doing elocution, verse speaking with Dergie Comer. Dergie Comer was my teacher. And the same year, I think, as winning that piano, the Tiny Tots class, I won the poem, whatever it was, under fives or under six. So there was a wee photo of me. I don't know if you can see that.
Isn't that wonderful?
That's me with the Dergie Comer Cup at Newry Fesh, and I think it was only 4. No, it was 5. It was the same year. So there we go.
The cup's really bigger than you.
The cup is definitely bigger than me.
So then, but when you went on through primary school, was there music in primary school for you?
There was. I was very lucky. I went to St. Peter's Primary School in Clough-Ray, and the primary 7 teacher in St. Peter's was Florence McAnulty. If you remember who Florence McAnulty was,
I do indeed. Yes.
The Derry Moore Singers.
Yeah.
And Florence was a huge influence in those years, because I joined the choir, the Derry Moore Singers. There was the 3 different levels, with the linnets, which were the babies, and then we progressed on to the juniors, I think, when I was maybe 11 or 12, and then after that, the senior choir. So there was always music inside and outside of school, particularly because of Florence's, you know, influence. I remember there was a great, in my primary 7, we did a school musical, a school play at St. Peter's, Cinderella, and it was great. But there's a video somewhere, there's evidence somewhere out there. But I was buttons in the play. But I also, because I was playing the violin and I was playing the recorder and the piano, I was also running down into the pit and playing the orchestra, and then running up on stage, sing a song, do a bit of acting, and then run back down again and play the next thing. So it was a bit mad.
So as you stepped through the Feis Tiny Tots for under 5, 6s, did you then continue with Feis and work your way through the different Feis classes?
I did, and I stayed with Miss Dent until I think it was 8 years old. So it was my first 4 years of piano lessons, and then Miss Dent took ill, and she wasn't very well at all, and I think she decided she wasn't going to continue teaching, she was going to retire. So my dad, being my dad was very switched on, and he knew that, you know, that we, myself and Joanne, were doing very well in local competitions, and, you know, in Newry and One Point Feis, and we'd also ventured up to Dublin to the Feis Creole about that stage as well, and we'd done quite well, you know. So my dad contacted very famous pianist John O'Connor in Dublin, who were taught at the Royal Irish Academy, and he said, "Would you, you know, listen to my kids?" And Dad, God love him, because he didn't really, you know, he was told that we could play well, but he didn't really know if we could or not. So it was a bit of a risk. Yeah. But we went up and we played for John, and John was very complimentary and said, "I don't actually have any space at the moment," but he recommended a teacher, a lady called Mabel Swinson, who was one of the top teachers in the country, and and we went and played for her, and that was it. We were in her class then. So I was 8 years old when we started going for lessons to Dublin.
It was a fair wee jaunt to Dublin in those days.
It was a fair wee jaunt to Dublin because, of course, the motorway of it, wasn't around. So it was a good sort of hour and a half, 2 hours, on the country roads. And this Florence was great, and St. Peter's and then subsequently St. Coleman's, because Mabel, our piano teacher, didn't teach at weekends, so we had to have the lesson during the week. And the school allowed me to leave early on a Monday to be able to get to Dublin, have my lesson, and obviously get back at a decent time. And then that continued on when I left St. Peter's into St. Coleman's, and Father Boyle, who was the principal, and of course Father Boyle has huge interest in classical music, so he was delighted to support it.
Yeah.
But I was incredibly lucky to have that that support, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to have had the chance to go and have classes with that lady. And Mabel was, without doubt, if I hadn't had lessons with her, I would not be doing what I'm doing now. She was a huge influence.
The first time I saw you on the stage, David, was in St. Coleman's in the school musical, George M. Cohen.
It was, yes, that's it, George M. Yeah.
And George M. Produced by Sean, I think Sean Hollywood.
Yes, it was Sean Hollywood, yeah. And Sinead Frame was the musical director.
Was that your first time then, apart from that little sojourn at the primary school, to take on a main role in a musical?
No, it wasn't. I was in a Newry Musical and Orchestral Society production in 1986, Oliver. And it wasn't a main role, obviously. I was Charlie Bates. That was I was Artful Dodger's sidekick. Yeah, and that was brilliant. I can't believe I found this. You ready for this? This was a T-shirt.
Oh, brilliant!
A T-shirt that all the boys got. In the last show of the run, we were presented with these T-shirts. 1986, Oliver. It was great, and it was a brilliant experience. I remember Charlie Smith was vegan, and he was fantastic, and I was mesmerized by Charlie. And I remember one night going on stage, and I had a line to deliver. And we'd just been out pickpocketing. It was after that, Consider Yourself, great number. And so myself and Dodger, Gary Moon played the Artful Dodger. And we came on stage, and my job was to reach into my pocket and produce a couple of whites. That was my line, couple of whites. I reached into the pocket, and I forgot to put the handkerchiefs in before I'd actually left the stage. So there was just invisible, nothing at all. And I was froze on the stage. I was thinking, what do I do? And Charlie just improvised with it. You forgot them, you idiot. And then off he went on to the next line. Oh, Jesus Christ. But no, it was a great experience, Oliver. Really, really good fun.
Charlie would never let you hang out to dry.
No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't, is right. No, he was so quick. Just and then off he went onto the next line. But it was great. So that was my I think that was my only time on stage for Newry Musical Society, because the other shows I was playing in the orchestra. But of course, Gus conducting. But I then did a show in the college in my second year at the college called Gilbert and Sullivan, Rudigore.
Right.
And I played one of the leads. I played a sailor called Richard. The reason I was picked was because I used to do Irish dancing. Did you know I used to do Irish dancing?
No, I didn't know you did Irish. It's not mentioned on that.
It's not mentioned that missing biography.
Either the short or the long version of the biography.
I was Ulster champion at one stage. From under 12s, I was an Ulster champion, and I wasn't too bad. I wasn't too bad at the Irish dancing.
Who did you go to for the dancing?
It was the Rooney School. Eileen Keenan, and I loved it. I loved the dancing, and because I could Irish dance, this character in Rudigore, Richard the sailor, had to dance a hornpipe in the show, so that's why I was given the role. Basically, a couple of songs to sing as well. So that was my first show in the college, and then a couple of years later was George M, which is where you saw me with my Yankee Doodle Dandy. When I was on the pantomime with Little Red Riding Hood, and Donal and Mary, I was saying to you earlier, taught me how to tap dance. And then Leo Reynolds came into the college to do all the choreography for our shows, and she was great. And so she showed me all the steps for the Yankee Doodle Dandy and the got the tap shoes. I still got the tap shoes somewhere in my mum's house in a drawer somewhere. My brother-in-law, Joanne's husband, Pat Pardon, he was in the show with he played my father in the show. And
So
I
many
remember
family relationships around this time.
I know, it's great. And I remember I'm great cracking rehearsals with Pat. And my best friend in school, Finian O'Neill, who did a lot of acting at New Point Players, and he lives in New York now. And there was a great Michael Legg and Kevin Trainer, and there was a great sort of cast in that show. And we had a ball. And of course, Sean Hollywood was just absolutely brilliant. The rehearsals they were intense. I remember that we had something like 6 weeks to learn that show, and it wasn't, for teenage boys to be doing all this kind of tap dancing and singing and the hats and the gains, and it was a tricky show, but it was great fun.
That transition then from St. Coleman's through into your next stage of musical development, that obviously came quite naturally for you. Your direction was sort of laid out.
It wasn't, Declan, because I kind of knew that I was going to be involved in the arts, but I wasn't sure which direction that would go, because I loved being on stage, and I loved acting, I loved singing, I loved the dancing, I loved playing. So there was multiple avenues that could have led me to, and at one stage, the musical theatre route was really an attractive route. But I think I knew deep down that the piano, but of course the piano and violin as well, that was the choice which I just wanted to go for. But the piano was always the thing I thought I can't actually do without. I have to play. It was like a little bit of an addiction.
Yeah.
And so I think by the time I got to about 15, 16, I knew that if I wanted to be really serious about making a performing career, I had to be at that stage. I was expected to be practicing 4 or 5 hours a day, while obviously doing schoolwork and all the rest. So it was pretty full on. My mom used to get me, bless my poor mom, she would get me up at 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning, particularly when I was doing my GCSEs, to go and practice. And I used to hate it, but I had to do it, because if I didn't do it, it wouldn't, it just wouldn't happen. And I had my heroes on, the people I would listen to perform on records and CDs and watching concerts and television broadcasts. I knew the level that I wanted to be. I was in finals of BBC Young Musician of the Year competition and RT Young Musician of the Future. I was doing some radio stuff. I was already beginning to build a bit of reputation.
Yeah.
And so when I went to college, and I went to Birmingham Conservitore, that's where I did my undergraduate. Which was a bit of an unusual choice, because now Birmingham Conservitore, it's not Royal Birmingham Conservitore, one of the, if not one of the largest or most respected music college in the UK. But at the time when I went, it was quite a small institution, and the places to go were London or Paris or New York. And I auditioned for London, I auditioned for New York at Juilliard, and I got a place in both there and the Royal Academy in London. But there was a certain teacher I wanted to study with who was teaching in Birmingham. So that's why I went to there. And the nice thing about going to a smaller institution like that, I was given an awful lot of opportunities, external opportunities from the college, because it was representing the college. So it was a kind of, it was a good route. It was a good route for me to take.
It's a strange question, I suppose, but are you performing for an audience or performing to an audience?
My main job is to convey music. That's my major. I'm like a vessel. Might sound very whatever, but it's very true. I get so very absorbed in the actual music, and I feel I wouldn't have done my job if I haven't actually transported that or communicated that to the audience.
Wheel of our images and emotions that go with the music. What emotions do you feel as the pianist?
It's a very interesting point, because what I would feel about a certain piece of music, or how it makes me feel, will obviously be very different to somebody else's experience of it. But so I don't know. I mean, and I'm not, when I'm playing something, all I want to do is to be as true to the music as I can, and how it makes me feel. That's what I want to try and convey. So, and I think most of the time, I think that actually comes across, and I think people actually get it. And
Yeah.
and the audience members will say to me, "My God, that was a really sort of passionate piece. So that was something that made me feel really dark and sort of whatever the sort of meaning is behind it." And of course, I mean, you mentioned the beginning of that, but the idea of me being very against this notion of classical music being elitist, which I am. Myself and Joanne have always been that this notion that really kind of bugs me, because it's music that's for everyone. Yeah. And I think it's very, very accessible. And I think people are put off by it. And perhaps classical musicians haven't helped themselves in the past by, they have this kind of, with the bow ties and the tailcoats, and it's been a little bit sort of austere and a little bit of a feeling of us and them in terms of the musicians and the audience. Joanne and I have set up Newry Chamber Music, our concert series. One of the most important things is for our series of concerts is that we always talk to our audience and say, look, this is what we're playing. This is a wee bit of context about the piece. This is what it's about, or this is what we think it's about. And we ask our musicians. So it's quite informal, and it should be informal, and it should be very kind of inclusive. I think actually before I went to college was the first time we did that. We'd have a Christmas show in the Arts Centre. And that was our year, and the idea was kind of giving something back, to our local audiences, and also being kind of aware that when we were growing up, as much as that there's a huge amount musically happening in this area, when it came to classical concerts, they were kind of few and far between, and we used to have to travel to Belfast or to Dublin to go and watch, an orchestra play or a classical pianist play. It was very rare that would happen in the Arts Centre, the town hall here, and we knew that there was an appetite for it. So I mean, we've proven that over the years, that we've had a lot of, our audiences got bigger and bigger, which is great. So that's how that started. And yes, when what was hugely important to us, and is hugely important to us, is obviously passing those opportunities on to younger musicians, who will, they have a platform to come and to play, and they come not just from this area but from all over. They come to play, which is great.
Have you got a little keyboard tucked in the back of your motorhome?
Not yet, but it's a plan. It's a plan, because this is very new. But the plan is, in all seriousness, I am going to get a little keyboard, because I have a relatively free summer, and I'm recording in August, and so I want to just drive around a bit, maybe go around the coast in England and up to Scotland, and maybe across here as well, and just have a wee keyboard I can plug in, and I bring the awning outside the motorhome, so I'll have the a wee picnic chair, and if anybody comes along and I'm practicing for my recordings, and I have a little hat on the side, and they can put a coin in, and that'll pay for the evening's meal and a few beers.
So if you're watching the sun going down on Galway Bay and hear rediscoveries, old and new music of Ireland coming from a motorhome, you'll know it's the one and only David Quigley from Camlock.
Spare a thought for the traveling musician and a couple of quid in the hat.
On so many fronts, congratulations to you on all that you've achieved. And congratulations to that adjudicator all those years ago at the Newry Feis for spotting your potential and maybe just giving you that nudge of encouragement in that direction that you needed. And really thank you very much to yourself and Joanne for the Newry Chamber Music and the platform that you provide, as you say, not just to local musicians, but that musician who needs that encouragement and that opportunity to perform. There are not many people who can really say they've performed in the Town Hall in Newry and Carnegie Hall in New York.
But
hold on to.
The question is, where was I most nervous, walking out in Carnegie Hall stage or Newry Town Hall stage? What do you reckon?
Strangely, they're probably equally balanced there,
Well, it's very interesting.
Each would bring its own sense of different nerves, maybe.
Oh, it does. A couple of years ago, I came to play, and there was the celebrations of, I can't remember which anniversary it was of Newry Feis. It was a major anniversary. Mm-hmm. Forgive me for forgetting, but and I was walking up onto the stage, and it was like I was back at Newry Feis, and all the kind of nerves and all the kind of, oh my God, we're walking out on stage, and you're expecting the adjudicator to be sitting there in the hall. So it's all somewhere in the psyche. It's all still there in the back of the mind. So, but there we go.